Ladies and gentlemen, Ready Set Data. I'm happy to be here. We have our wonderful host, Lee Markum, data administrator. I'm Anthony
Hello.
Fortner, data engineer. And today, spoiler alert, we're going to be talking about interview questions. We have a list of them we're going to go through. More on that later. I'm happy to be back. I remind everybody we have a YouTube channel you can check out. And we are simultaneously streaming right now to LinkedIn, Twitch, I said it right, and Twitter. Yay. Um, cool. So, how's your week been, Mr. Lee?
The week has been good. The other it's been a little busier than normal, but not too much. The other partner in crime at my company has been out. They're coming back tomorrow, and but I've gotten a lot of stuff done, and you know it's going okay. Life's
Cool. Yeah,
good.
it's December. A lot of people are taking time off. I'm actually off today. That was kind of nice. But yeah, it's either one person's off or I'm off, or the last 2 days, most of the people are off. So yeah,
Yep.
it's the holidays. As we get closer, it's just going to keep getting more and more dense. And then we'll be back in January, at least physically, maybe not mentally, but we'll be
Yeah.
back.
I agree. I am taking some time off. I'm off the week of the 19th, I think, and so that'll be nice to have that whole week off. I didn't take the week after that, so I was planning to work, before New Year's, but I anticipate that it will be smooth sailing. There's like most IT organizations, we're not doing a whole lot in December because of what you said. People are off. It's the holidays. We want people to enjoy their families, extended families, friends, that sort of thing. So,
All right, so back to the meat and potatoes. We are talking about well, okay, so basically you can fill us all in a little bit better, but you have a list, as you said, 4 categories of questions that you can ask if you're interviewing for a position. So as in, you're applying for a job, like things you can ask your possible employer, right?
that is correct. Yes. So, through trial and error, I, over the years, had built up a Word doc that contained questions that I knew I wanted to ask, or that I thought I could potentially want to ask employers when I got into an interview scenario. And at some point, I just got tired of like redoing the Word doc and, what was that question again? What did I want to ask? So I just saved it and just kept building on it. And then, as I am the organizer of chaos, unless you ask my wife, I gave it some categories and moved some questions around and gave it an outline, blah blah blah. And so that's what we're going to talk about. Here's the put the link up to my GitHub where you can find and download the entire Word doc for yourself if that's something that you're interested in. And so yeah, that's what we're going to look at.
Awesome. Yeah,
So
this will be really helpful for situations where you keep leaving these interviews. You go, you know what, I should have asked. Oh, I could have asked. Or you talk to your friend, colleague, coworker, whomever, and they're like, why didn't you ask about this? And you're like, oh, that's a great suggestion. Now you can add it to your list, right? And you can come
exactly.
prepared.
I actually added something today that a mutual friend of ours sent me over in Slack in a direct message, and it'll pop up at the appropriate time. And but yeah, I mean, I'm always working on it. As I was looking at it, kind of prepping for this, I thought there are some questions in here that probably need some updating, or you get rid of it. And I can talk a little bit about just how I use the Word doc before we get into it. So Usually what I do is I'll download the doc, get it opened up. And as I'm thinking about the company that I'm going to interview with, I kind of reread from top to bottom the questions. And sometimes I will use the Word doc strikeout formatting to get rid of questions that I know I'm not going to ask. If I come across a question that I definitely want to ask, then I usually bold it. So it's easy. From a visual perspective, it's easy for me to then find it. And I don't have to try to visually search the doc or scroll the Word doc while the person is waiting for me to ask my question, that sort of thing. So that's some prep I do with the doc itself before I even get started.
I like the strikeout idea. Like go through it before you go beforehand. Oh, I like all the suggestions beforehand. Do a little customization. You got use this like a template, or make your own and use it like a template. And
Right.
then before you're talking to, company A, you can kind of tweak it a little bit to make it make sense. Company B, all these questions don't apply. Let's get rid of them.
Right. Exactly. So we're going to talk about 4 categories, and this first one I'm going to put up here is company culture questions, trying to figure out what will it be like to work at this place. And so I think that's an important category. I mean, everybody wishes they had some magic 8-ball, something that would give them the insight, like they've been best buds with someone at the company and they can get the inside scoop from the best bud on what is it like to work for company X.
The first category, company culture questions. This is a good time to remind people when you're interviewing for a job, it's not just, sometimes it feels like it, but it's not just you're trying to sell yourself to the company. Remember, the company's selling itself to you. And we always hear people talk about, oh, if we're going to hire this candidate, are they a good fit for our culture? It goes both ways. Like if you're most of the time, and I know there's a gig economy or something going on right now, but most of the time you're there for a non-trivial amount of time. Let's make sure that you're going to be comfortable there, working with these people.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And that really helped me early on in the interview process in learning how to prep for interviews, was realization that you gave right there. It's just as important for me to think of this as I'm interviewing the company as it is for me to realize that they're interviewing me. It has to be a two-way match or it doesn't work. So company culture questions. This one is going to be on a topic that we have talked about, but not ad nauseum, it feels like, to some degree, but it's been a while. Is this job fully remote? Now, this seems like a super obvious thing that you don't really have to ask, but you do. And the reason is that it's apparent from some job listings that the word remote, it doesn't mean what some people think it means. To paraphrase one of my favorite movies, The Princess Bride by S. Morgenstern. Okay.
You keep saying this word, but I don't think it means what you think it means.
Exactly. And I think we need to put Webster's dictionary out on some job platforms and help people understand, because we'll see things like remote and then it'll say, or fully remote, and they'll say 1 day in the office or 2 days in the office. And when I see that, and I know, listeners, people looking at this later, watching later, might be like, well, obviously that's not remote. I know. That's the point. Employers seem to not understand what the word remote means. And so I would ask, is this job fully remote? You've got it listed as remote. Is it really? Like, do I have to come in? And so I think it's an important question, just to clear the air up front.
Yeah, that's when and that's also where you get an opportunity for them to say, well, yeah, of course it is, mostly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or yeah, it's remote. As soon as you've made it past this qualifying amount of time, it's 30, 60, 90 days, which, I mean, that sounds fair. You want to know that, right? Or
Right.
you definitely want to know that if, let's say, you live in a different state, and that's going to
Yes.
be a no-go. You don't want to waste your time.
Right. Right. Exactly. So now that we've kind of gotten the obvious, that first obvious thing out of the way, another thing that I have on our list is the dress policy business casual, business professional? Now, obviously, if they tell you the job is 100% remote, that might not be as important, but you still might want to ask some form. I mean, you're going to be on camera at some point. Can I show up to work in my PJs on the camera if I'm working remote from my living room? But especially if you're going to go into the office, like, how am I supposed to dress? What should I look like when I show up? I think that's an important question. What do you think?
I agree. You mentioned camera, so yeah, definitely they may want you to, have a much cleaner environment. I have a lot of stuff. I have my personality on display, right? But maybe they want a different. Maybe you're a consultant for a company. You're a sales engineer, so you need to have a certain presence when you're on calls with big companies who trust you with big things. You might
Right.
need to have a certain background behind you. You might now, if I was selling board games, that'd be good to go, right?
You would.
Um, Another thing I think I want to throw in here is when you're asking these questions. Oh yeah, well, full remote. Do I need the camera on? Is that
Mm,
mandatory? Now, some people that's very important, right? Some people they maybe would rather not have the camera on all the time. Is it mandatory? Is it not mandatory? But there's certain times we might need to do it. I've been in a situation where it's like, hey, we have person A and person B on the call. Let's kind of show up, look good on, and have the camera on, and be
yeah.
very very intentional and present. Right, that happens. So you want to know if that's something, or if you can literally not have the camera on. Um, I hear there are companies. My company doesn't do this. I hear there are companies where where they require you to have your camera on at all times while you're working. That's a thing.
I
Find that
have
out
seen
now.
that. Yeah, that's a great point about cameras. So I might be doing some editing on this as we work through this, because I'm going to discover some new things that I should probably ask. Yeah, that's great about cameras, and I think it's important not only just because you're going to know, but some people can get ready in 5 minutes. Some people take an hour, and
Why you gotta call me out?
so so that's important to know. I mean, am I going to have to get up at 6 a.m. or 5 a.m.? So here's another one, or kind of another set, 2 or 3 questions about something that we've all lived through, which is COVID-19. So I have 3 questions related to the pandemic. How did the company respond? What measures were taken? And sometimes you can see that information, or at least a little bit, in job descriptions. Sometimes companies are, I think, getting smart and adding some of that information, but not always. The next question in this category, or this idea of pandemic and company culture, is what kind of financial impact did the pandemic have on the company? Some people are not always going to be willing to share that information, but I think it's good to ask to see what are they going to tell me. And
Why?
then what's that?
I said why. Why do you ask? Hey, so what is it? I had to check the time. It is 2022 o'clock. Um, why are you asking what the financial situation was 3 years ago?
Because the financial situation might not have changed a whole lot.
Hmm.
Um, they might still be trying to recover. I mean, hopefully not.
Or maybe they are, and they have a good story to tell. Like, this is why we're hiring.
Yeah,
Like,
there you go.
We're rebuilding. We've risen from the ashes like a phoenix. I mean, if they're good at telling stories, no, we're taking the ring to Mordor. I hope I got that right. And, can we have your sword?
Yeah. So fair point. I mean, that question might not be as relevant now that we're close to 3 years in, but it's something I definitely asked about. I think it's something you should think about when you are going into an interview. Am I going into an interview with a company in an industry that has been hurt by the pandemic? Because it could happen again.
Right. That was actually my next point. You beat me to it. Yeah. Like, that may have been 3 years ago, but now that we've had that and we have tools and situations and plans for that, the next time, swine flu happens, bird flu, penguin flu, alligator flu happens, they might say, hey, we're gonna shut down again for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. If you're entering a company that is in an industry that is fragile as far as that's concerned, hope that's not too strong of a word, has a sensitivity to those kind of situations, you want to know, right?
Yes.
You should factor that into your math, in my opinion.
Absolutely. The next question was, what was the work from home policy in IT prior to COVID-19? And I have, and what are the plans going forward? This is more toward the beginning of the pandemic, but I think the first half is probably still good to ask, or at least think about. And again, you don't have to, I mentioned, I think at the beginning, you don't have to ask every single question on here. The questions are meant to get you thinking about what you should ask, or what should you be thinking about. I think it's still relevant to think about how the pandemic might affect your company and thus your role in the company. So even if you hate these 3 questions, make your own questions about the pandemic's impact. I still think this category of questions within company culture is important. So that last one again, what was the work from home policy in IT prior to COVID-19? Thoughts on that question?
I think it's still a good question. Don't let me, when I challenge you, don't take them to heart, right? I think it's good for content. I think it's good for,
Sure.
testing out some of these things we're talking about. But let's say more time passes. You don't want to necessarily mention COVID-19 if enough time has passed. I still think it's a good question. You could ask, okay, so what's your work at home policy? Well, how long has it been like that? Well, we just changed it, right?
Yes.
Well, if you find out that they did it just because of COVID-19, hey, so what's your plans going forward? Is anyone talking about changing it? How steady is that? And you can get paranoid and say, well, why would they warn you if they hear whispers, if they want you on the team? But give them a chance to be honest. And also, how they answer the question might tell you a lot. If they take a lot of pride in the fact that, like, oh yeah, no, we've gone full remote. The teams love it. The people love it. Production is great. Performance is great. This is a fit for us. And you hear them sing that song, you have an idea that that's something they believe in, and you can, maybe feel comfortable switching them if work from home is very important to you.
Right. Sure. And conversely, if they sing the other song, that tells you something too. And that may or may not fit with what you like. So I think, that it can still reveal good things that you need to know or think about. So
absolutely.
So my next question, still in this company culture questions category, is what community service projects are the company or company employees engaged in? So many employees really want some kind of social impact. They want to be a part of a company that's having a social impact, a positive one. And so this question is geared to get at that. I've seen companies that will advertise the fact that they give you, X number of days paid per year to go build houses or whatever thing it is that they're trying to support, or X number of days for you to go find your own thing to participate in. It just has to be, pre-approved and, scheduled, arranged, that sort of stuff. So community service projects.
So I've definitely worked with people who had like particular causes in mind that they definitely wanted to be active in. And then you find out that the company also supports that. That's a selling point, right? They have all these events, they have everything. I want to be involved in that. I want to work with a company that's involved with that. So I think, getting the employer talking about what activities the company's doing with the community is probably a good thing to know.
And here's the question that came from our mutual friend. He actually
That's a great question.
He actually found it on social media and sent it to me in a chat message today. And I formulated it into a question. What steps does the company take to recognize and avoid employee burnout?
Oops. Although that's a great question, I was thinking the next question is a different question. Pie on my face. I like it. That's a good question. I like that.
Why do you like it? Why do you think it's relevant?
Because if they weren't prepared for that, I'm thinking from the negative point of view, forgive me. If they weren't prepared for that and they're like, how do we recognize people? Well, we say good job, and I don't know. Then you have an idea of what's going on there. If they're like, actually, here's some things we do to recognize people, then you're going to get you're probably going to get a download depending on where they are on that spectrum, right? So
yeah,
I've worked at plenty of places that have point systems where you get awards, you get call outs. I had a previous employer that had a quarterly and a yearly celebration. So there's a certain award you can get, and then you end up in a pool, and they pick a handful, and every quarter you are in that pool that you get a celebration. And then in the year, all those people had like a full catered, fancy, big deal with food and drinks and all that stuff. Like it was nice, right? And so you felt recognized. Worked at a place that pulled the Texas Roadhouse. You eat at Texas Roadhouse?
I do. Yes, I think it's a marvelous place.
It's a great place. A lot of restaurants do this. It's your birthday, walk by, and they.
Yeah.
I worked at a place where there's certain ward members of management and a few other people would come by your desk and give you balloons, and they'd clap and talk real loud. And if you're anything like me, you'd blush. Maybe that's a disincentive. I don't know. I punish myself a lot, apparently. So yeah, recognition can be very important, and you want to know whether they recognize somebody for their contributions or they do not.
Well, how does that work? Like earlier, you were talking about recognizing people, and the company had an awards event. Everybody's in a pool. Like, how did that work?
Oh, so okay.
Swimming? Like you have a swimming party?
No.
Oh, different kind of pool.
Yeah, different kind of pool. Pool party.
Yeah, we're gonna have a pool party, and that's where we're gonna give our recognition. So that brings a whole new meaning back to the dress code question I asked earlier. So yeah, recognition. How do you recognize employees, and what do you do to spot burnout, and how do you address that? I've not noticed it as much over the last maybe 6 months or so, but there was a while that there were burnout. Somebody was talking about burnout 3, 4, 5 times a week as I scroll through Twitter, for example. Yeah, it's really bad in IT industry, of course, medical industry. There was horrific burnout. Teachers are burning out. It's just, we're all flaming out. It's all just, we're burnt to a crisp from working hard. So I think this gets to, what's work-life balance like? Am I going to be working 60 hours a week and that's the norm? Are you going to be unhappy with me if I'm not working 60 hours a week? And what do I think about your answer to that question? So, something I've added recently to this is any layoffs this year. I don't know if companies will be honest about that, but might be worth asking just to see what they say to you, especially if you know the answer. What is the person going to tell you?
Come on, assume positive intent. No, that's a good point. Like, ask, see what their answer is, how they word it. Layoffs happen, restructuring happens, and this gives them opportunity to explain who, what, where, how, and why. Well, maybe not who.
For sure.
Yeah,
not who.
Yeah.
Maybe what department.
Yeah, like, it could have been like one particular department. I worked somewhere where a lot of the layoffs were around the fact that they just completely got rid of a building. They moved out of a city, right? So they're like, oh yeah, there was a layoff, but the people who were willing to move to another location, this is pre 2019, right? People willing to move to another location, they kept working with us, but people who wanted to stay in that state, it had happened. Well, that makes sense. I'm not in that state, so maybe I'm okay. It's good to hear the why and how they talk about it, and whether or not, all it was a one-time thing. We really don't do a lot of that. Hopefully.
Yeah. I just put benefits questions. People want to know things like, what's the PTO like? Is it 2 weeks? I've been doing this job for 15 years. Do I have to start at 2 weeks like everyone else? Or are you going to give me 3 or 4 weeks, which is what I probably had at my last company if I'd been there that long? Or, there's this, there's a tendency to award more vacation for people who've been in the industry longer. So that's, I think, a question that you might want to ask. What's the PTO like? I've seen some places where there is no strict PTO because there's no pool of PTO. We're back to the pool again. There's no keeping track of hours. There's no accrual. I can talk. Accrual. Maybe we should just use the word pool. There's no pool of time.
We do a lot of swimming here in ReadySetData.
Apparently. There's no pool of time for PTO because it's unlimited PTO. And if that's the answer you get, then you're like, okay, so how does that work? Like, can I take the next 6 months off? Who approves that?
How does that work?
Yeah. Discretionary time off. I've seen unpaid time off, unpaid. I've seen unlimited time off be called discretionary time off because it's at the discretion of your manager. That sort of thing. So,
it's stuff you got to ask. Good question.
What is the 401k matching like at this company?
Is there one?
Yes. Is there one? You should ask a question about 401k matching. You should not assume that there is 401k matching. Mm-hmm. Not everyone does that. Not every company provides that. So this is a question that you need to ask some form of. Does it
not
have to be?
Not every company has a 401k, right?
Well, I guess that's true. And I feel like this is a super important question. And I feel like also it doesn't matter if you're in your 20s. To me, this is still a very important question. The faster you start putting money into a 401k, keep it stocked, keep it moving around. Because as you switch companies, you're going to want to move it and keep growing it. If you start it when you're 25, you're going to have a lot more in there than if you wait until you're 40 or 50. So I don't think this is just an important question for, people who have retirement in mind. If you're only thinking about this once you have retirement in mind, you've already missed the boat.
Yeah, this is ReadySetData. We talk about IT related things, especially in data. We're not giving financial or investment advice, but I have a hunch everyone agrees with us. Put money into your retirement.
Yeah, I got on a soapbox there. Anyway, 401k matching. You should ask a question about it, I think.
I don't think I've ever asked the next one. Well, if I have the same list as you, can I see insurance cost information? I never asked that. You can be like, hey, like, how much is insurance going to cost?
Yeah. So I have a question then for you. Why didn't you ask that question?
Because I didn't think about it till now.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
I've always asked like a more vague question, like what's the insurance like? What's the options? And then I end up getting answers that are just as vague, oh, I think they're good. Well, I've worked at a particular company I've worked for whose benefits were like, the stereotype is like the post office has really good benefits. I have no idea if that's true or not. I just hear that a lot. That I would argue would, like, beat anybody in the water as far as medical and everything else. You didn't pay for anything, right? It was one of those places was great. So when I hear good, I go, but is it? Because places that have good benefits weren't as good as the other particular employer, right? So you ask a vague question, you get a vague answer. You got to figure out what good is, what's great, what the bias is. And I didn't realize until I read this that, hey, I could just ask the question, well, how much would I have to pay insurance? What about my plus one? If it's me and a partner, how much does that cost? If I add children in the mix, do I pay per head? What about legs? Or is it just whole family, right?
Yeah. The insurance only covers damage to the face, just the kid's face.
Anyway. It only deals with the front because that's where the important stuff is, right? Like, why do we always say, hey, man, I got your back? Like, shouldn't you be protecting the front? That's where the good stuff is. I don't know.
Yeah.
What do I know? I think it's a good question.
Cool. I'm glad you like it. This actually saved me from making a huge mistake.
Oh.
One time. The insurance costs were so much higher than what I was already paying that the company would have had to raise my base annual salary like $10,000 to cover the additional insurance costs.
Wow.
They were not willing to do that. And I said, I am not willing to work for you. And, 3x or 4x my insurance costs.
I can feel that.
So that's all the questions I have on benefits. Do you have anything else, kind of in this category that makes sense to you that you've asked before?
I don't think so. I think I kind of gave it away when we asked about costs. Like for particular reasons, like I like to know, is the plus one covered? And maybe for each particular person that's different. Maybe it doesn't matter if you're single, right? But like, does the plus one covered? And then are kids, is it just family or is it kids per person? And I kind of already alluded to that, but that's something I'd ask, right?
Right. Okay.
I want to know what you got to figure that out. Some people, just on the subject of benefits, I know a non-zero amount of people who look for jobs particularly for the benefits. They have a significant other who makes plenty of greenbacks, or insert color of your monetary document for your country. Whatever your monopoly money is. They make lots of money, and they really are looking for a place that is okay. They want to work there, and then they can get the benefits because not every job has benefits. So,
yeah. I just thought of one. So, and you may not have to ask this because a lot of people, a lot of companies, I keep saying people when I mean companies, a lot of companies will give you a list of benefits but I was thinking about tuition reimbursement.
Thank you. Good point.
How does that work? If my kid gets a passing grade but not a great grade, or if I get it, if I go to school and I get a passing but not great grade, like where's the line there? Do
That's
I
a
have
good question.
Yeah.
You said you just realized you were talking about children for a second there.
I
Are
was.
children covered? Yeah. Is am I covered? Is children covered? Is a spouse covered? Right? How much? What's the rules on that? Is it fully covered? I worked for a place that would cover the whole thing as long as they reimbursed and you had to have a certain grade.
Yeah.
I've also worked at places that would pay you very quickly, or even you show receipt, they pay all that, every possible scenario I think I've seen. And maybe they didn't cover 100 though, but they'd cover 50, 30, 25,
Yeah.
15.
Yeah. So, question for you: we're wrapped up being the benefits category. Do you want to take the next section? Because I know you also have this doc in front of you, or do you want me to keep going?
Oh yeah, we can hand off.
Okay.
Let's break into it. So the next one, if you can handle the bubble on the bottom of the screen, team environment questions. This is a fun category. So I mentioned it earlier. We tend to hover around IT. We tend to talk a lot about data. So this question has IT in the question. How many people are in IT in general, and on what specific team would I interact with? So this is worded in a way where you'd be by yourself and be interacting with one team. That's how you're wording it? Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Who am I working with? What people am I deal with? Who am I going to argue with? Right. I think that's a very DBA centric answer, isn't it? Who am I going to be arguing with? No. Yeah, I think that's a good question. Who I interact with every day? Because it depends. You might be in a back room somewhere, checking your indexes, closing your tickets, or you might be actively in meetings with developers or product owners, product managers, designing the next system. So it depends on where you work. Every place is different.
Yeah, I think this question can help you. Sometimes you can find out from this, am I a team of one?
Yeah.
And you might like that. You might not like that. And so it's a good way to get some info for sure.
Okay. All right. How long have those employees been in their roles? So that's clearly feeding off the last one. So the last one was, who am I working with? This question is, well, how long have they been here? Am I working with juniors? Am I working with seniors? Or not even that. I mean, they could be seniors and have only been here for 6 months. Is it a new team? That could matter.
Yes, that could matter. What I'm trying to get at here is I'm trying subtly to ask, do your company have a lot of turnover?
What's the turnover like here?
Yeah. I could be direct and ask that question, but I feel like I have less of a chance of getting a truthful answer that way. So I don't know.
And since we mentioned turnover, and I don't know if it's already on the sheet somewhere, but I'm inspired. When you ask about turnover, you can also ask, is there exit interviews, right? One, just so you know, because you get hired and you want to leave. But also, are they taking the time to ask people who are leaving questions? Because that could be part of continuous improvement. Is the company hearing people on the way out, listening and adapting to what they hear, right?
Yeah, right. That's a great question. It's a great point. For sure.
So the next one under the category of team environment questions, could you describe the interaction and collaboration between the team members? I love it. I like this kind of questions because you get the people, hopefully you're talking to people who know, right? you get them talking and hopefully telling a story, which is usually what I say when I'm interviewing someone. You want to get them talking, you want to get them telling a story. 100% this just from the other side. Get them to say, well, this is how it tends to work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just realized, I mean, this could be in the culture category, I suppose. But I feel like the company culture questions, those
Broader.
are really, yeah, they're broader. And you're probably talking to an HR person who can't really tell you about the interaction of the team members. So it's kind of a cultural question for the smaller scope of what's this team like?
Yeah, especially when you get to talking to maybe the hiring manager, maybe a SME or a senior on the team. Depends on what the hiring practices are. Once you get to somebody who knows how everything works and how everyone interacts, you want to get them to tell that story.
Yeah.
The next one's a good one. Definitely for IT. Definitely for a DBA. I skipped one. I'm gonna go with it. Definitely important. What is the on-call situation like? Is there rotation? How does it work? How many calls should I expect?
Yeah, I don't know if there are a lot of development teams that have to deal with this. Maybe. I mean, my experience has been no. The development
Really?
teams
Okay.
aren't usually on call, but I know that, I've only worked in a small number of companies compared to the
Yeah.
number of companies in the United States. So maybe my experience is not normal in that respect. But yeah, this is a question that's very important to me because I asked this question at an interview, got an answer, and then ran screaming from the company because the answer was a complete lie. So
Wow.
I still ask it, hoping that I'll be told the truth. But yeah, this is an important question to me.
Well, yeah, absolutely, because you're finding out how much of your off time is not truly off, how much of your free time is not truly free. Yeah,
Right.
I think it's an important question. And I
So,
think it does apply whether you're DBA or developer. A lot of
okay.
companies do have on-call times.
Okay. So that's the question that answers it, I guess. I was going to ask you. So is this a thing that developers should be asking as well?
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, 100%. I think if you're in
Okay.
IT at all, you should ask because every company is different. Um, Me and you both worked at a company that at the same time um, that didn't have a lot of on call for developers. There was a choice handful that had the on call. Um, so that's a perk. That's nice. There are
Sure.
definitely places where not only you're on call, but you're doing your deployments after hours on Wednesday, for example. So yeah, you should. If you're in IT, you should ask the question. Don't assume you
Okay.
do not. Um, don't assume you do. Ask.
Okay. Very good.
Mm-hmm. Next, the one I skipped. Do the roles here tend to be cross functional, providing opportunities to learn from other employees in other areas, even when they are not on your own same team?
So this gets to a couple of things, but the first thing that pops into my head as I'm reading this or hearing this question from you is what I'm trying to find out is if you're telling me you have a DevOps environment, what does that mean to you? Uh, what is if you're telling me, oh, we have an agile DevOps uh, environment at company X, and I ask you this question, it's going to tell me. I feel like it's going to tell me a lot about what DevOps means to you.
Oh, interesting how that turned into a DevOps question. I like it because I thought this was like a cross training up question, but you're wanting to know how does everyone interact. I think that's a great question.
Yeah, I mean, I want both, but
Mhm.
especially if a company is at the beginning of interviews, a lot of hiring managers will tell you about the company. They'll tell you what they think about things or how they run their teams or whatever. And they might trot out the DevOps course or talk about Agile or this kind of stuff. And when I think of DevOps and I think of teams and Agile, I think of cross-functional teams. We've got people like you and I are on a team, and we have a person that might be a system administrator, and we have a network engineer, and maybe we have another developer, and that's a team. And while we all have certain skills that we're deep in, when we're working on stuff, the whole team is responsible for the stuff. And so the network person might be really curious about what the developers are doing. Probably not, but probably more likely to ask the DBA because that's at least something more. It's like more systems, more infrastructure, or the system administrator, and they get to work together to fix something, and they learn from each other. That's kind of what I'm trying to figure out. Is that how your teams work at your place, or no? How do they work? Am I going to get to learn?
Cross-functional?
Yeah.
Is it actually cross-functional, or is it silos where the front-end team has to talk to the mid-tier team, or the mid-tier team has to talk to the data team to the infrastructure team? How's it all divided up? I like cross-functional teams. I know it can't always be practical depending on the situation, how work flows through, but I like them. I think that's how me and you started interacting originally, right? I was the AOA Spare guide. I was the data guy on a cross-functional team. And so a lot of times when our team needed something more DBA-ish, I was the one typically talking to you. Like, okay, we crossed the line where I don't know what I'm doing, which still happens every day. Well, I don't know what I'm doing, so I reached out to you and asked, right? So
yeah, for sure.
Next up, with respect to training and learning, some companies leave that entirely up to the employee. Some do strictly internal, employee-to-employee training, and some pay for employees to attend training. Where does, insert company here, fall on that spectrum? So this is literally, you're just all out asking a training question. How do you train?
Yeah, and I'm trying to spell out the options that I'm aware of. Maybe that's not necessary to do. But yeah, I'm essentially asking, what's training like at your company? Because I want to know that. I think people going into any kind of a role, whether even if it's not IT, should be thinking about, how am I going to learn my job? There's new stuff to learn. How am I going to learn that?
This applies to seniors too, right? It's not just juniors trying to learn up their skill set. It's junior, mid, senior, whatever, architect level. You come in, there's a lot of business, there's a lot of rules, there's a lot of tribal knowledge is one of my favorite terms. It's a lot of tribal knowledge that you might need to absorb, right? You might be switching industries actually. So all the developers or DBAs or whatnot know certain things in that industry. And let's say you're switching from banking to manufacturing. There's different things you got to learn, right? So yeah, how am I going to learn that? You're going to have me a big old book, big old Bible to study, or are you going to let me sit with people, peer programming, etc., etc.? Great question. Next up. Oh, hold on. Yeah, Spirit, you sound busy. Sorry, responding to chat. This is also about training. What training activities, such as conferences or past meetings, have IT employees been to in the last several years?
Yeah, this is another way of asking the previous question. I'm just trying to find out how invested is the company in their employees. Not
only is it just asking how invested they are in employees, but are they sending people places, right? Or even allowing that. I've seen different variations, right? There's I guess the variation where they do anywhere, and well, the answer might be, well, you have 3 weeks vacation, take a week off and go wherever you want, right? I mean, that's an
Yeah.
answer. Another answer is we'll pay you when you go, and the awesome answer is we'll pay for you to go. So that
Yeah.
just shows how invested they are in you. You know, I there's kind of the assumption that it's related to your work, but
Sure.
yeah, that's definitely when you that answer will really suss out how important is them for you to be a continuingly educated professional. Especially conferences tend to get you like the bleeding edge information too. Get your finger on the pulse of what's happening. What is work-life balance like, and why are you lying? No, that's not what's written here. What is work-life balance like? How many hours a week should I anticipate working? If I end up putting in extra hours on one day, can I take off early or come in late at a later time? Is there comp time?
Yeah. Is there comp time?
Yeah.
Um,
Or do they just say no, it ain't happening?
yeah, and I've even had some situations where, as I've asked this question, I end up uh, we end up splitting hairs over at what point does comp time to kick in. If I work 45 hours, do I get a half a day somewhere, or do I
Well,
have
that
to?
depends. Did you work an extra half day, or you just do a lot of early lunches, or did you just skip a bunch of lunches, or yeah, you end up with those conversations.
Yeah, exactly. Um,
Question from the audience:
yes, there is one.
do you find that conferences tend to focus more at a higher level of what's going on and eschew from the granular, or is there a balance? Mm. Oh, we have it up on the screen.
We
That's
can,
awesome.
yes,
I love it. Okay, I should have waited then. If I didn't know you can do that.
that's totally fine.
Duly noted. Yeah, I'm okay just answering this right out. It depends. I see both. So here in St. Louis, that's where I'm at, St. Louis. The DevUp conference, for example, I like going there because I don't have to fly out anywhere special. There will be overarching ones that talk about high level. In fact, there was one really interesting one at the last DevUp conference. Literally was just about how to break out and become a consultant and how that worked in a particular person's story, what he learned, what went wrong. He was brutally honest about the things that went wrong. It was very, it wasn't granular. It wasn't nitpicky. There was no code on the screen that I remember, unless it was like a little graphic on a PowerPoint, right? And I've also seen, hey, bring your laptop. You're hopefully working with me, and we're going to do a thing. And I've seen that for data, for creating your. We're going to create a REST API. One time there was I can't remember what I'm not a security professional, but they were showing how to hack a website. They were showing like this is how I would mess with your site and get information so that we can be like, oh no, this is bad, and hopefully code against that, right?
Yeah,
So yeah, the whole gambit. I think each conference will probably have its own personality though, and you have to find that out. Can you speak for your experience with Pass? Do you feel like that leaned a certain way?
yeah, I absolutely can speak toward it. So, Pass was very much an all levels kind of environment, which I like because that means if I'm really feeling the deep dive for an entire week and I want to crush some brain cells, I can do that. If I'm not feeling that and I just kind of want to get the 100 level, show me how the thing works, I can do that too. And if I want to mix it up, great, I can do it. So the summit is very much everything. You can get 100, 200, 300, and even a few 400 level. We're going to show you the inner workings of the cells of the things. And So you can get it all there.
That's great. Yeah, I like all of the above. I'll like high level one. I'll like a low level one. We mentioned two. I guess we can mention one more. It's AKB, right? Yeah, AKB.
Yes.
That tends to be like level 400, and I love it. And I'm exhausted. I admit I'm exhausted afterwards, but I love that one. Just people discussing how to like micromanage the infrastructure, the CPU, everything to make one machine just an absolute powerhouse workhorse. Most of us mere mortals won't be doing that kind of work, but yeah, it's awesome. Um, oh, goodbye. Thank you. Um, Next up, what would my work? Okay, this is a simple one. What will my work hours be? Will they be anything? Is it set? Is it flexible?
Yep.
Do you do the core hours situation where like you're working 40 hours a week, but all we worry about is you need to make sure you're available from 9 o'clock till whatever time. Uh,
Yep.
9 to 4, you must basically be available. The rest of the time, that's on you. Um, or is it strictly 7-4?
And this really tells you a lot about the company. It tells you a lot about your manager, because if you
Culture.
get, yeah, it tells you a culture. It tells you information about the culture. If they're like, you must be on from 7 to 4, and we're going to check Teams to make sure it shows you're active for that time, and you can only be on lunch for 60 minutes, and we'll know if you're on lunch for 61 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
That tells you a thing.
It tells you a few things. Yeah,
Yeah.
agreed. A few more before we're done with this category. I have. So the next one. This was on the team environment questions. So we talked about interacting with other teams and different aspects of working, but how will I interact with my manager? In theory, the person you're talking to is going to be your manager if you accept the job and or hired. How do we interact? What's that like? And that really just depends. You might be a junior and want a lot of interaction. I've definitely heard people complain that they didn't talk or deal with their manager often enough. I've heard the opposite side. The manager is dealing with every aspect of your day, and maybe you're not comfortable with that, or maybe you need that. So it's a good time to ask, because yeah, they could lie, but there's no real incentive to, because if they say, well, honestly, you have to schedule meetings with me once a week, and that is or is not what you want, they don't know that, right? Or no one's going to say they micromanage, but they might be saying, oh yeah, we're working together all the time, and you may not like that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
is said manager technical and or hands-on? This is
Yeah.
important too. Sometimes your manager is just a manager, and that's okay. Sometimes they're technical, and I can argue that that could be either way for you. You may want to work in an environment where you're the technical person and the manager's coming to you for advice, coming to you, asking you questions, and you're handling it. Or you might hate that, right?
Yeah.
We need to work together on this.
Yeah. Again, some of this is it. We go back to what we said at the beginning. This is a two-way street. They want information about you. You want information about them. You're trying to figure out, am I a fit for this manager that I'm talking to? Just as much as they're trying to answer the question, is this person a fit for me? And so, yeah, you want to know. You want to know that. You want to ask questions that will tell you the answer to that. If you're a person who likes hands-off managers and that's not the answer you get, that could be a red flag. Just depends on how strongly you feel about it. It could lead to follow-up questions to help you understand, okay, this is a hands-on manager, but what does that look like? And so I think these are definitely questions to help you get that information.
Absolutely. Um, that's it for this category. The fourth category is technical environment questions. So, for example, this is very DBA centric. How many SQL Server instances are there? What's the largest database size? Like, what am I dealing with? What am I going to manage?
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know, like, how would you, or maybe you don't care. I don't know. Is this important to you, or was this important to you as a developer? Or is there a way to like smooth that question out or make it relevant for you?
Yeah, if you're not a DBA and you're a developer, maybe you're asking like, what kind of technology do you scale up or scale out? What's your methodology with that? Um, are you dealing with the IIS servers or whatever your well, whatever what kind of load balancing do you have? I don't know. There's a lot of questions you can ask, right? Figure that out. Ask now. Um, what versions and editions of SQL Server are in use, and what percentage breakdown of those versions or editions? So if I'm reading this right, basically, do I have all the new toys and all the old toys? Is it just the old toys or just the new toys? How's it scattered about? Like, there's a lot of different variations.
Yep.
The interview is a good time to ask that question.
Yeah, and with SQL Server, I don't know what it's like with other platforms, but with SQL Server, you have both version and edition. So a version is, think of that as the year. Am I dealing with SQL Server version 2005? Spoiler alert, if that comes up, run away. Um,
Unless that's your specialty. I mean, they exist.
okay, maybe. Or am I do I have 2005 all the way to SQL Server 2022? And then secondly, what editions? Is it standard? Is it enterprise? Is it web? I hope not. Because the different combinations of year and or version and edition will tell you what kind of environment you have. If they say, oh, it's mostly SQL Server 2008, 8R2, we have some 2012, and it's all standard edition. And we have 4 SQL servers, or we have 20.
We're 300.
It's small, or 300. If you have 300 and it's all standard, that company is super committed to not using the special toys of Enterprise Edition. And I would ask more questions about that, because I would be really shocked.
which
Yeah.
part of what this is, right? You get them talking and you figure things out, and it triggers you to ask questions.
Yep, for sure. What else we have?
Is the IT environment using physical servers, private cloud, public cloud, or some sort of combination, aka hybrid?
Yep. I think this is important because a lot of the jobs I'm seeing, they list cloud as required. And I have a strong feeling that if you don't have at least some cloud exposure, you're going to get left behind. And so if you're interviewing and especially if you're interviewing in 2022, and a company says to you, we have only physical servers and we're not going to the cloud, we're not even thinking about that. That I'm just going to say that wouldn't be the place for me. Maybe it would be a place for someone else, but that wouldn't work for me, because it tells you certain leanings about the company and the management that's there. And if those leanings fit you, okay. But yeah, that's why the question's there.
Yeah, that's a big part of what we're trying to find out, right? Are they a fit for us, or we a fit for them? Next questions. How often are Windows updates and SQL Server updates or service packs applied. If the environment is physical, how often is the hardware replaced? So basically, how often do we make sure we do our updates, make sure we replace hardware? Do we let a machine sit in the corner running for 20 years and hope for the best? Do we change it up really fast? What's the cadence there?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think those are important things. Again, it's about fit and figuring out, because when you know how you feel about these things, and you're trying to get the company to tell you how they feel about them.
Yeah. Or how the decision makers feel about it. You
Right.
may not be interviewing with your manager, you may be interviewing with potential coworkers, right? Sometimes it's 2, 3, 4 rounds. Sometimes you're talking to, seniors, and they're just, little worker bees like you.
Yeah, for sure.
Can you describe the development or sandbox area for testing new technologies, or does that even exist?
Yep. Yeah. And you'll notice that a couple of these, I just assume it's there, which I feel like tells the interviewer something about me.
Yeah.
I'm trusting, dear manager, that you know this is important and you're about to tell me whether we're aligned or not.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. Absolutely. Like, hey, so what's your favorite blah and why is it this? um
Yeah.
yeah, and that is something that's also important to me, right? Like the you need to be able to test and sandbox these things. Because of the last questions, right? Like, I know my bias is I want to upgrade as soon as possible. As much fun as it is to like let a technology get old and then jump several versions, um, all of us have lived through that. Not all of us enjoy that, right?
Yeah.
So my personal bias is, as soon as something's safe, let's do this, right? I mean, as soon as it's safe, let's test it out. Let's do it in a sandbox. And not only is it just because I want to do it as quickly as possible, but also because I'd like to make sure that we trust it. Instead of it being like, Hail Mary, let's go for it, we've already battle tested it in a dev environment.
I just want to interject. There are still like a ton of questions, and we've been going like an hour and 15.
Oh,
So
there are. You want to make this a two-parter and finish up the technical ones? And the technical ones are very DBA specific, so we can probably make sure we start with that in the next video.
yeah, we can do it next time. We can make this a two-parter and finish this out. Just know that there's in this technical environment questions, it's longer. Here's my philosophy on this. The reason the technical part is longer is because I am, and as an IT person, I'm trying to find out everything I possibly can about the environment that I am potentially going to inherit. So this is why it's longer. Some of these questions, the early questions were like just general environment things. Tell me about SQL Server. Tell me about your largest databases. How do you handle maintenance? How do you do patching? I've got questions in here about asking about indexes and CheckDB because I care about those things. And depending on what you tell me, it could be a red flag. I have security and compliance questions. Who has access to stuff? What kind of access? How do you know if they have access? How do you know when there's a problem? So I have some monitoring questions. I have questions about automation and change management. Do you have rules about change management? There's high availability and disaster questions. So there's a lot of stuff in the technical section.
Yeah, another thing about the technical section is it depends on your role. We tend to be data specific here, but even in general IT, it really depends on your role. And even if we stick specifically to data, there is differences between being a DBA or a development DBA, right? Not every DBA has the same job, cloud or on-prem. That stuff matters.
Yes.
A data engineer or database developer, you're still in the trenches of T-SQL and permissions and and isolation levels, even if you're a database developer. So, the technical questions might vary. Well, they definitely vary depending on your role and some of what you deal with.
Yeah.
But maybe we can go in depth with technical ones on a later show.
Because I would love to hear the technical stuff that you think about, or that you think other people that aren't DBAs or aren't database centric might ask. So I do want to do that. I want to jump to section 5, which it says wrap up questions, because I want to be able to give that to this group and into this video. So can we talk about that one?
Sure. So wrap up questions. We skipped ahead to section 5. Based on the interview so far, do you have any concerns or further questions about my experience that I could answer? So this is you telling them to bring it.
Yeah, or if an answer I gave raised a red flag, I'm asking this so that they can ask the question again, or rephrase a question, or say, you said X, and I'm really curious about why you said X. Because we think Y. Tell us why Y is wrong. I don't know, that's the purpose of this. I'm trying to get a chance to redo anything that I might have flubbed.
Right. Or, at least to calibrate. Because sometimes, as a hiring manager, sometimes the candidate doesn't agree with you. And sometimes it ends up being a good thing. Like you get an insight into what they're thinking. Maybe the way they word their answer or rebuttal to what you assert might paint a picture of like their experience, what they know, and you might still end up thinking this is a good asset because we don't necessarily want an echo chamber, right?
Yeah. For sure.
Next up is what are the next steps? This is one I always ask.
Yeah, and why do you always ask it?
I ask because I want to know what they're thinking we're going to do. If they say, oh, next we're going to talk. So let's say you're talking to experts, and next you're talking to the hiring manager. And after that, you're going to talk to someone above them. And that's the final step. You know about how long, you know what's happening. And you also will find out, oh, you're going to you'll be contacted in 24, 48, 72 hours.
Yeah.
We're hiring for 4 positions. We're talking to a lot of people. It's going to be a week. Nowadays, it's a bad idea, employers. But it might be a week before you get the next call. You're going to want to know because you're not going to want to think after 72 hours, well, I wonder why I never got a call.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. It's all the same reasons that I asked this question. I want to know. And sometimes you can, throughout the interview, you get a sense of how well you're doing. But thank you for that. So this question will sometimes, if you don't have that sense yet, can give you a sense of how well you did. What's the person's assessment of you? They'll say little things when they answer this question that can help you get a sense of, oh, they liked me. Oh, they didn't like me, whatever. So we're at the end of the questions for today. Yep. We're going to circle back and take a look at the technical questions that you can ask, some more technical questions that you can ask as part of an IT interview questions template in another episode, another session of the podcast. So we definitely appreciate having everyone here. I'm going to let Anthony wrap us up here beyond what I've said.
Yeah, I'll just wrap it up with this has been great. I like all these questions. It's good fodder to get you thinking. If anybody wants to join us on Discord, you can join us on Discord. We can talk about this. We can have active conversations. Let us know what questions we missed. What questions do you ask? What questions do we ask? Did we explain why? you want to ask us further questions on our questions, that'd be a good place to do it. Or hit us up on Twitter. That our Twitter deets was shared in chat. So other than that, I guess that's it. Good night, everybody. I'm Anthony Fortner, data engineer.
And Lee Markum, database administrator. Thanks for joining us. Have a good night.
Good night, everybody.